Hi, my name is Michelle Nelson and I am the mayor of the Village of Flossmoor. I want to thank the League of Women Voters and everybody who's giving up part of their day to be here today. Also want to say Happy International Women's Day and thank all the women who are here making a difference throughout the Southland. So thank you. Give yourself a pat on the back. I earned my degree in civil engineering from the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, and my husband and I moved to the Village of Flossmoor 21 years ago. Back then we only had one child, now we have 4 children. 3 are in college, 1 is a sophomore at Homewood-Flossmoor High School. During my time here, I've been very active supporting a variety of charities that help with animals, families, and education. 11 years ago, I started HF Robotics. That is an organization that teaches STEM concepts to children ages 9 through 18. 10 years ago, the Village of Homewood tapped me on the shoulder and asked me to help them out with this project, the Homewood Science Center, where I sit on the board. HF Robotics was the very first organization that they brought on, and if anybody wants to tour our lab in the back after this, I'd be happy to show you around. Currently, I helped start the Foundation for the Preservation of Flossmoor History, and we're working on that project. And also, I am an ex officio with the Flossmoor Veterans Wall of Honor. I'm also on the Council of Mayors for the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, and I serve on the Transportation Committee and also the Executive Board of the South Suburban Mayors and Managers Association. I am really excited to get your questions today and to talk about 4 of my main topics that I ran on 4 years ago and that I'd like to continue working on, which also follow our strategic plan, which are promoting the Village of Flossmoor, growing the Village of Flossmoor, fixing our infrastructure, and also raising our home values. Thank you again for being here.
Yeah, Joni Bradley-Scott.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks again for coming out to hear us talk about these important issues today. Thanks again to the Homewood Science Center and the League of Women Voters for hosting the event. I'm Joni Bradley-Scott, and my husband and I, Percy, have lived in Flossmoor for 14 years. We have 4 wonderful children, 2 who have thrived in Flossmoor schools. 3 are graduating in May from law school, college, and Parker Junior High, and we have a son at Homewood-Flossmoor who is a junior. Go Vikings! I am rooted in Flossmoor and invested in our community. As a longtime public servant, first as village clerk in 2017, then appointed in 2019 as trustee, and then re-elected in 2021, I've worked hard to serve our community with integrity and a focus on positive results. With a background in higher education, organizational leadership, and real estate, I understand the importance of strong school systems, impactful leadership, and keeping our community safe. I want to put the right people and structures in place to successfully attract businesses and highlight Flossmoor's unique qualities. I look forward to bringing solutions to resolve our infrastructure concerns and identifying untapped resources to fund them. I look forward to bringing solutions as mayor, and I will champion open communications that will result in a government that truly works for you. I believe that together we can build a stronger, more vibrant Flossmoor. As an addition, I am a member of Jack and Jill of America, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated, and many other organizations that are deeply rooted in service. Thank you so much.
Okay, all right. Our first question, and Joni Bradley-Scott, it will go to you. The question is, what steps would you take to help lower property taxes? What steps would you try to take to help lower property taxes?
That's a great question, and I'm sure that's one that everyone in the room wants to know more about. With our property taxes, as we know here in Illinois, we are, as residents, strongly providing resources where the state is not paying their fair share. And so understanding that it is up to us as residents, as concerned citizens, to work with our elected officials to make our voices heard in the Southland. It is a collective approach. We as Flossmoor residents cannot do it alone. We have to work with our neighboring communities to be able to get what we need to happen across the state of Illinois in terms of the legislation paying their fair share, in terms of the state paying their fair share. And we have to do it collectively together. As a small village, a small town, it's really up to us to be the change that we want to see. And so it's definitely approached from a community partnership. I think we only have a minute. Do we have a minute?
90 seconds.
90
seconds. Okay.
Do you want to say some more?
No, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. We have worked incredibly hard on economic development here in the village of Flossmoor over the past 4 years. If you remember 4 years ago, folks were building warehouse spaces, and we had somebody come to us and say, let's build a warehouse in Flossmoor. And I said, absolutely not, that's not what residents want. And then we had somebody come to us and say, let's put up some oil changing and car parts place. And I said, no, that's not what we want either. So I stepped into this economic development role because we don't have one. We're a small village, and that's not something that we can really afford to have. So we brought on a consultant that did all sorts of cell phone data analysis, put together a profile for our community that we could really start to market the village of Flossmoor. Did a national feature in a Business View magazine, put all of that cell phone data and marketing materials on a newly created economic development page on flossmoor.org. Started listing our publicly owned properties. We hadn't done that before. And the results, we're starting to see the results. We've been building a lot of momentum. We have a new project on Flossmoor Road, 13 luxury townhomes and a cafe space that is going through the plan review process currently. Another project for a Korean barbecue and outdoor family-friendly event space on Governor's Highway that the board just approved last Monday. And on Bulmer Road, we've got 3 developers now looking at that property. So all of those efforts, we're building a ton of momentum and really excited about what's coming up here in the near future and what's coming up in the year or 2 to come.
Okay, thank you very much. And for this next question, Michelle Nelson will be starting. What is your plan for transparency or communication in the community?
Thank you so much. Great question. I think one of the most important parts of transparency is being available. And you will see me at just about every single block party, most HOA meetings, a lot of community organizational meetings, because I care. I want to be at places where our residents are so that they can talk with me, they can share their concerns. I think just about everybody in the village also has my cell phone number, and if they don't, they know somebody who does. And I take calls anytime, anywhere from 6 a.m. till sometimes 11 p.m. at night, helping folks with issues that they're facing, sometimes personal and sometimes property. So I'm really proud of that. Also, Facebook, you'll notice that I post a lot on Facebook about what I'm doing. I don't have somebody following me around taking pictures and doing posts like some of our neighboring towns' mayors have. That's all from me. That is all genuine, and I want you to see what I'm doing so that if there's something that I'm doing that can help you, that you know to reach out to me. And I also like to promote folks because I think we just have some amazing residents here in the village of Flossmoor, and it's really an honor to share their stories and find different connections that we can make. We also brought on somebody part-time for communications in the village of Flossmoor, Nicole Castagna. She has been incredible at streamlining our communications, making sure that they're consistent, making sure that you know exactly what's coming up with a board meeting. And so I'm really happy with that communications work that we've done, but always open to more suggestions and how we can do better. Thank you.
I think that from a transparency standpoint, the village can do that by being more open in terms of how we as a board interact and transpire business with our community. I think that the information that when we sit on the board, sometimes it can be a little confusing and a little bit hard to digest. So we need to provide information in a way that the community can receive it. Likewise, one of the things that I think is really important in terms of budgeting, in terms of the community understanding what our resources are, is that our trustees work really hard in the community. But I think that one way we can translate that a little better is having a budgeting committee so that our residents can sit in and be able to understand and have a voice with their concerns in terms of how we're doing business and communicating that information to the community. We do have a community communications department, and again, we want to be able to translate what we're doing on the village side, our wins, and our opportunity areas in a succinct way where we can get that information out to the community. If trustees are sitting on these committees, we can therefore get that information out to the board and highlight that in a way that the community can digest. In the newsletter, just make it real simple so that people can know when we are able to, spend responsibly and save money in different areas in terms of how we're conducting business.
Okay, thank you very much. This next question asks, how would you proceed in a crisis of real magnitude for the community? And Joni Bradley-Scott, you have the...
One of the ways that we can provide information to the community when there is a crisis of real magnitude is utilize the resources of support that already exist. I'll go back to a few things that have happened in our community, one being the police-involved shooting with Madeline Miller, in that we had a protocol in place based on the police department's operations. So we relied on the police department's way of handling things. That would have been one way to resolve and get information out to the community in a timely, efficient, and responsible manner. Also, when we had an incident that involved someone getting accosted and robbed and so forth. So we have to be able to assess what the situation was, be able to know exactly what our protocols are, and get that information out to the community, be able to have the resources to investigate so we as residents know that we're safe and know that we are operating in today's times. Times have changed, communication and social media, various resources are available to us at our disposal. So we want to be able to communicate to the community like they are used to and hearing information. And there was one more thing that I wanted to say.
Thank you so much. In the event of a crisis of real magnitude, one of the things that the village is currently doing is that we participate in tabletop exercises, and we don't do that just with our own department. We do that in collaboration with all of our schools, our public schools and our private schools. And those tabletop exercises are around storms and also active school shooters. We don't like to talk about that, but we do drills in order to prepare for those if the worst should happen. So we have a great team. We have a great team that is collaborating with partner organizations and partner schools throughout the community so that they've been there and they've done that and they know reflexively how to react in those situations. Every situation is different, so it does require a little finesse, but you have some great directors in the police department, fire department, public works, village management, who are all working collaboratively to make sure that we get through whatever crisis it is, and we get through it well.
Thank you both very much. Michelle would be first with this next question. The general fund has a very healthy balance of approximately $8,322,000 as of the 2024 past audit. How will you continue to keep it in a positive direction?
Sure, thank you so much. There was an ad put out in the Chronicle recently that said that we were operating at a deficit, and the village has budget meetings for the next, the third Monday in March, the first and the third Mondays in April. So I invite everybody to come out to see those. and to hear the budget presentation. Yes, we do have a very healthy fund balance. Of that $8.3 million audited balance, we're required to have $3.6 million in reserves. So we have about $4.5 million to use for capital projects, or projects that basically help the village serve you, the residents, better. How do we make sure that that fund balance stays healthy? To me, it's through economic development, making sure we continue the momentum, that we're continuing to take village-owned property and turn it into productive tax-producing uses. And it's also continuing to go after grants. We've received $7.3 million in grant funds since 2021. That's $7.3 million that we're not having to get a loan for. That's $7.3 million that we're able to use to tackle some decades-long projects here in the village of Flossmoor. So that's how I would continue to handle that balance and make sure that that balance stays strong.
Can you read the question again?
Yeah. Let me try this one more time. The general fund has a very healthy balance of approximately $8,322,000 as of the 2024 past audit. How will you continue to keep it in a positive direction?
I think that the most important thing and the number one aspect of our budgeting is that we have to continually plan responsibly. I think that the village has been planning and doing the best we can with less. Because of what we know in terms of the state resources and the federal resources being diminishing resources at times, we have to be critical and thoughtful about how we do that. And so the $8.3 million budget is fantastic. It is very a fortunate thing that we can say here in Flossmoor compared to some of the experiences of our neighboring communities. And as Mayor Nelson mentioned, we have had grants that have been able to allow us to stretch our dollar. As it pertains to the $1 million operating deficit, I can go over that after this session for anybody who wants to stick around, but we have a $1 million operating deficit that means that we're pulling from our reserves. And we have a projection of $1.3 billion in a deficit, as well as $300,000. So if we keep moving in that direction, then that means that our fund balance will not be healthy. And we have to look at the future. Because we haven't had a five-year budgeting analysis in 2024, we are looking at, if we're continually moving in this direction, we're moving at a deficit. So as you do your household savings and planning, you don't want to continue pulling from your savings.
Okay, thank you. This may be a little more as a follow-up. There is mention of the deficit, and the question is, there's two. How do you plan to fix it? What do you think it came from? And Joni Bradley-Scott will start.
So with the planned deficit, we have infrastructure projects and all types of things that we're attempting to conquer here in Flossmoor. And because of the last administration, the last presidential administration, who was heavily invested in infrastructure, we were able to make up some of our projects and go take our money further because of those grant awards. Moving forward, it's likely that we won't be able to have the same investment in terms of grants that we had in the past. And so that's where the economic development comes in, as well as cutting some of the, or reframing some of our expenses so that we're not operating thin. Right now we have an 89% of our budget goes to fixed costs. So in order to have an impact, we have to reframe how we are approaching our expenses and the services that we provide.
Thank you so much. That $1 million deficit that keeps getting thrown around, that's not a deficit. It's a planned operating deficit. It's money that we're taking from our savings to put back into the community, which is what you should do. You should invest the money back into the community to make repairs as needed. That money last year went towards facility upgrades for Village Hall. It went for water service projects and also water and sewer service projects. So that is a planned deficit for projects that are needed to make your lives here in the Village of Flossmoor better. We do a lot with a little. We'll continue to go after the grants. My understanding after talking with our federal lobbyist is there might be less dollars out there. They're not quite sure. Things change from day to day. But typically infrastructure is very well funded on both sides of the aisle. And so we'll continue to press and work hard for every single dollar to bring it back here to benefit you.
Okay, thank you very much. This next question, and Michelle will start with you. Is home rule good for Flossmoor? Is home rule good for Flossmoor?
I think that's a question for the residents. I think that's something that the residents need to decide. Home rule does give us some advantages in terms of taxation. We can tax and raise money in different ways that may be easier. There are also some rules that we could, there's some ways that we can be more competitive. Though the state is constantly looking at those, and I think that there's been some recent legislation that has really helped us as a village. For example, when folks aren't keeping up their properties and when we need to fine them, there used to be a maximum of $2,500 per home. If you lived in a home rule community, you could fine a home up to $25,000. So in January 1st of 2024, J.B. Pritzker passed a bill that allowed us to fine homes up to $25,000, and if the homeowners don't pay, then we can lien the properties, and that's one good way of helping us keep our homes and the neighbors' homes up to the same standard that you have for your homes. So where were we going with that? Sorry, lost my train of thought. But home rule, is it a good idea? I don't think so, not necessarily. I think it's up to you, the voters, though. It gives a village unlimited taxation ability, and I think that's something for you to decide. And that's it.
I agree with Mayor Nelson on this one in terms of it being a voter-driven response in terms of whether or not that is something that you'd like to see in our community. There are benefits and for our residents, but there are some things that people may not consider benefits. The opportunity, I live in Heather Hill and Polly Lane, and there was a shooting on the block on Christmas Eve. And so residents were very concerned about how that was handled and what we could do to work with the property owner, who is Invitation Homes. And so when we have things like that happen in our community, we want to see, perhaps government make some strong moves to eradicate the problem. But not being a home rule community did not allow the village to operate in a way that residents would have liked to see in terms of getting the tenants out or finding the property owner and perhaps some other stricter measures. So there are benefits to a home rule community, and there are cons perhaps that people may not like to see happen in terms of how you are fined, how we engage with property owners, and certain things that on a day-to-day, how you keep your upkeep your property and how we will fine you for that. Other things that
You want to finish your sentence?
Oh, I was just going to say that other things that communities do is they have inspections for when they sell home. When you sell your home, they have a property inspection that the village does, and we don't do that here in Flossmoor. You're welcome to sell your property without a fine, but in the communities that have home rules, some of them go to an additional revenue source so that they can, gain revenue from you selling your home.
All right, thank you. And Joni Bradley-Scott, this next question starts with you. How will you keep businesses in Flossmoor?
I think that is a wonderful question. As it pertains to businesses, economic development is an area that we can definitely improve on. Right now, we do not have a dedicated economic development person on staff with a background in urban planning or economic development to draw new businesses. We also have published a resource that gives businesses information about our residents here in Flossmoor, but we also need to provide an opportunity where our community has an opportunity to interact with Flossmoor to tell us what you want to see here. I think that we have to be very intentional, that we must be inclusive to all of our residents to see what businesses that they would support. There have been grant opportunities that have been available that the village has taken a part of. I think it would be awesome if the village was reciprocal and let residents know or business owners know what resources are available to help their businesses. We have to do better to see what businesses are going to be the right fit, what residents are willing to support, and be able to, since we have this business directory, let companies know how we can support one another so that we can keep the money in Flossmoor more, circulating in Flossmoor more. Thinking about a community benefit agreement, that may be something that we can explore as well.
So partnerships are key, and a couple of things that I think that we can continue doing to keep businesses in Flossmoor. One, back in 2021 when I first came on, I realized that our small businesses needed more support, so immediately latched onto the Chicago Southland Chamber of Commerce and asked them to start an event with me called Chamber Night. And that was something that the village didn't fund, but myself and a few others went and got private donations to fund for the village of Flossmoor. That event shines a spotlight throughout the region. We have folks from Chicago even come down for that event. It's a one-night concert with the Illinois Philharmonic Orchestra and usually a really good opening act. And that helps our small business community thrive. The other thing that we're doing this summer, we've got a streetscape renovation project. We've got a $1.2 million grant that is going to completely redo the streets, the sidewalks, all of the native plantings, the tree grates, and make our downtown business community accessible and more inviting. So that's going to be an exciting project that also helps bring folks in. Continued collaboration with building owners such as Flossmoor Commons. That building was all but empty when I took office in 2021, and we've been working together to promote businesses in the village, in Flossmoor Commons, and those owners have been just great partners, sinking hundreds of thousands of dollars into that development. They've got 2 more businesses moving in, and I think only 3 vacancies to choose from, so it's been great.
Thank you very much. And Michelle, this one will start with you. What is your position on ending local telecommunications tax? What is your position on ending local telecommunications tax?
That's actually something that I haven't thought a lot about. We don't get much revenue from telecommunications tax these days. That's something that's been dwindling. And actually what we've been looking at instead is an entertainment tax for streaming, because we see some of these revenues dipping, and we definitely, in order to continue to provide the level of services that we do, we need to find these revenues other places. So I have seen the telecommunications tax dwindling. It is something that is important that we rely on, and I think that we need to explore other ways to make up for that loss of revenue.
The telecommunication tax, since I joined the board in 2017, we have seen that resource be not so as reliable as it had been in the past. I think that is extremely important to look at additional revenue streams so that we can make up for what we have lost and create new ways to earn additional income here. Other than that, I don't have any other input on the telecommunication tax.
Okay, thank you. This question is just, it's about traffic in Homewood. I guess I would reword it and just say, and this would start with Joni Bradley-Scott. Are you aware of dangerous traffic areas in Flossmoor and what interventions might be put in place?
The only dangerous areas that I can think of are around our schools during school arrival and dismissal. I live again in Heather Hill, and that has been a concern for many, many years. With our other schools in Flossmoor, we have a one-way traffic pattern during school times. And I believe even though Heather Hill has many arteries that lead to the school, I think that we need to rethink how our traffic patterns run during school hours to keep our children safe. Unfortunately, sometimes it's like NASCAR around the school, and it is an inconvenience to residents to have to take a different route, but I think it's extremely important. We also know that the county is doing a road project down Kedzie Avenue from Balmer Road to 159th Street. And so I think that is a new way to enjoy our neighborhoods, where we will have bike paths and walkability in some instances. I think we need to retrain our teens and our families on what those bike patterns mean here in Flossmoor, because those aren't things that we are accustomed to. But otherwise, I think that we are a pretty safe town as it pertains to traffic.
Thank you. I would agree that the areas around schools, especially during pickup and drop off, are tricky. We have 2 years ago we installed a school zone. There was no school zone on Governor's Highway going by the high school, so we petitioned the state for that. We were successful in getting a school zone added. On my federal priorities list is also a stoplight on Governor's Highway. I think that would be tremendously helpful for the high school as well. That's a $1 million project, though. That's not something that we can fund. That's something that we need grant support from. So that's something that I continue to push at a federal level. CMAP, the Chicago Metropolitan Area for Planning, they did a study of our local roads. The problem was they were just hitting our county and our state roads. So one of the things that I've asked our police department to do is an internal review, an internal audit of how we are staffing our local roads and where those resources are best served and where they're needed. And then the last thing I'll mention is radars. We've invested in some additional radars that help alert drivers as to what their actual speed is. We just put one in over by Heather Hill Elementary. Thank you to a generous donor, a resident who bought that and placed that for us. So those are some of the things that we're doing to work on improving traffic flow in the village.
Thank you very much. And this question, Michelle, will start with you. How do you think the Heather Hill Basin project went? What would you have done differently? So how do you think the Heather Hill Basin project went, and what would you have done differently?
Flooding in Heather Hill has been an issue for decades, and I remember a certain trustee Mitros, who's not that young, talking about when he was a kid, it was an issue. Millions of dollars have been spent by residents and also business owners in flood mediation. And so the Heather Hill Basin project was a real win for this community, because it is going to alleviate decades-long flooding, and it's also going to save residents and business owners millions of dollars in damage going forward. It's taking the water that was in an unpredictable state, and it is directing it into a controlled environment. It is way more dangerous, and you hear about it every spring. It's coming up, and I'm scared to death, but you hear about kids dying in uncontrolled floodwaters on streets, in neighborhoods. And all of that water now is going to be directed into a basin where it's going to be held for 9 hours and then drained responsibly into a creek so as not to flood the folks downstream. That project, the US EPA backed that project. They gave us a generous grant. The US Army Corps of Engineers backed that project. They also gave us a generous grant. We are very lucky to finally be able to tackle a project that has plagued the village of Flossmoor for decades, thanks to the grant work that we've done.
Can you read the question again?
How do you think the Heather Hill Basin project went, and what would you have done differently?
So, yes, that's a great question. How did the project go? I don't think it went well. I think that the ultimate goal of the project was resolved, but the pathway to get there was not. The community in Heather Hill was not invited to the table in order to have input, understand, have conversation, and be a community partner in the project. So I believe that those are things that we could have done better, and because it was a project that had been planned for many, many years, it was a huge opportunity to have a connection and a supporter within the Heather Hill community. So what could we have done differently? We could have invited the neighbors to the table early and often to make sure we had that dialogue and communication to make sure that the end goal of flood mitigation was solved. At the end of the day, no one wants to live with flooding. As mentioned, it is a huge pull on resources, and in a lot of cases, residents were not aware that they were purchasing homes that could potentially flood to that magnitude. So I think that being a responsible, leader in our community to have that communication early and often would have been amazing for the Heather Hill community. And I believe that they would have been able to back and support a project no matter what, as long as they were brought to the table to have input. To look at it in hindsight and say, the flooding was resolved and you had no say so, that doesn't, bide well as the community that we have here in Flossmoor.
Thank you. And Joni Bradley-Scott, this is your next question. What is your position to end place of eating sales tax? What is your position to end place of eating sales tax?
So in a small town like ours, where we don't have a lot of availability for various infrastructure projects, for opportunities for economic development, it is an opportunity to gain additional revenue. However, when we are looking at our resources and what we have to pay with our discretionary income, we want to, we don't want to feel like we're nickel and dime in our own community. That is a line item and a way for the village to make money, but it is not when you're a resident of a community. You don't want to feel like you have to pay for every single service and it's being attached to everything that you do. So as a board member, that would not be something that I would support. I would challenge the village to turn over other stones to find more money in other ways. We see it all around town. Everybody's doing it. Just because everyone's doing it doesn't mean it's appropriate for us.
Thanks. Yeah, just to be clear, there is no places for eating sales tax in the village of Flossmoor. There's definitely places for eating sales taxes in several neighboring communities, including Homewood. And I know that's a good way for them to generate income. That doesn't necessarily come from the residents. It comes from folks throughout the region who are visiting the restaurants. And I know they've got several restaurants that draw from a very wide radius. I just want to quickly go back, though, to the question before, since I have a little bit of time. The Heather Hill Basin project, to say that there was no communication, I think it's just something I'd like to respond to. We put out over 30 different ways of a means of communication. Whether it was a Chronicle article, whether it was public meetings at the Park District, at the school district, letters to the homes, e-news, newsletters, social media posts. I even sat with residents to talk with them about the project and took a group of PTO parents and a school board member to see what a dry bottom detention basin looked like. And then we also realized that there were some concerns and wanted to respond to residents. So to say that we didn't respond to residents, I don't think is entirely accurate. I think some folks in the PTO at Heather Hill asked us if we could install a 6-foot fence. And although we don't have one around other basins in the village, we said, sure, no problem, we'll put in a 6-foot fence around the basin. And then they also asked us to move the basin to be a little further from the playground. It was originally 20 feet from the playground. We moved it to 50 feet from the playground. So we did hear those concerns, and we appreciate the resident feedback and welcome it at all times. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Michelle, this question is for you to start with. What would be your plans for HOAs? How would you allow them to be more inclusive of old restrictions?
What does that mean, inclusive of?
I would assume that meant pulling along some of their old restrictions into the new HOA plans.
So, okay, thank you. I'm sorry, whoever asked this, if you want to talk more about it afterwards, maybe some clarification would help me. But HOAs, the village really doesn't have anything to do with HOAs. HOAs are bodies that are set up by the developer, and they've got their own governing board that manages their own finance and their own infrastructure. Definitely what I think that HOAs are good for is a way to bring people together to collaborate. Great for communication when you need to get information out about what's happening in a neighborhood. So the village has worked to support HOAs in terms of that communication piece as a way to really get out the word about what's happening in the village. And yeah, that's all I have on HOAs. Thank you, though.
As mentioned, I'm not sure that I understand the question fully, but I do know that there are several homeowner organizations within the village. Some of them have monthly payments as part of their mortgage, paid separately to the HOA for maintenance, and then others have a quarterly or once a year payment to the HOA to cover the green spaces, maintain their parks and other features that are in their communities. So I'm not exactly sure exactly where to go with that question, but I do believe, as mentioned, that it's a great way to get out information, a great way to convene with the residents and let them know what is going on in the area that they need to be tuned into. And not to beat the horse, but I just want to go back to the previous question regarding the detention basin. So the detention basin initially was called the Flossmoor Road Viaduct Project and was renamed the Heather Hill Detention Basin a few months before the project actually was constructed. And so given the amount of time that I was speaking of, the 3 or 4 years that we have been working on the project, we would have been intentional to call the project by name so that the Heather Hill residents knew that they were being communicated with. When I call my kids and I say Xavier for Aubrey, Xavier doesn't come. So we have to be able to call the thing up front and often, and that would have been a way to keep the community engaged and informed.
All right, thank you. We have 2 more questions before we wrap up. And Joni Bradley-Scott, we'll start with you. What do you believe are the most important qualities to be an effective mayor? What do you believe are the most important qualities to be an effective mayor?
I think that the most important qualities to be an effective mayor is honesty, transparency, and leadership. The reason I outline those qualities is because that is what the community expects, and I believe those are the qualities that the community is asking for. As mayor, it is very great to be able to have personal relationships with our residents and to be able to communicate with them in ways that they want to be communicated. But it's also important to communicate to everyone early and often on the plans and aspects that you plan to fulfill in your role. People look to a mayor to be transparent and accountable and provide inclusive leadership so that there are no gaps in judgment, that everyone is hearing the same information, and that everyone feels like they have a buy-in, and that when things aren't going your way, that you can receive that information too. As a leader, everybody's not going to be a supporter or a fan of all of the things that happen necessarily, but you do want them to understand and to be able to have a voice in the matter and be able to see the path that you're going and all of the decisions that you make, and be able to circulate it and be able to find evidence in all of the things that you say so that you can have the buy-in and support that you're looking for.
Thank you.
Thank you. Top qualities of being a mayor, I think the number one quality that kind of encompasses a bunch of other qualities is to be an advocate for you and what you need to improve your existence here in Flossmoor, whether it be personal or whether it be about your property. My number one job is to advocate for you. What does that mean? I've got to be a good listener. Everybody here has a different story, a different background, a different viewpoint, and I can't tell what it is just by looking at you. So I really have to take the time to get to know you, to find out how we can best help you. The next one is you've got to be bold. You've got to be willing to ask people at a national level, a state level, a local level, and even businesses, top businesses. You've got to be able to ask for help. You've got to be able to ask people to check out your village, to see what kind of partnerships they would look like if they were to invest in your village or if they were to give you a grant for a project. And we've built some fantastic relationships over the past couple of years. You've also got to have a backbone because not every project, not every decision you will be able to get consensus over. And it's really frustrating because I do want to bring people together. I do want to have everybody agree. But at the end of the day, sometimes despite your best efforts, it's just not possible. And so then the last quality is you need to have thick skin because people will be, they'll say some things that are probably inappropriate, that hurt. So you really have to have thick skin at the end of the day.
Thank you very much. And this will be our last question, and then after this one, we can move to your closing statements. What are your 3 top priorities for the Village of Flossmoor, and how would you plan to achieve them? So what are your 3 top priorities for the Village of Flossmoor, and how would you plan to achieve them? And we'll start with Michelle.
I'm going to start with volunteerism. Volunteerism is our superpower here in the Village of Flossmoor, and we've done some incredible things. MLK Day of Service, planting 600 trees since 2021 in the parkways. 300 of those trees got us a Governor's Hometown Award from J.B. Pritzker. So activities like that continue to bring us together, to connect us so that we can get to know our neighbors, and then also that we can use to promote the village on a much larger scale. That's priority number 1, is to continue that spirit of volunteerism. And I don't believe in asking anybody to do anything that I wouldn't be willing to do myself, so you'll see me at all of those volunteer events. It's really a lot of fun for me. Second is economic development, continuing to build on the momentum. I talked about Flossmoor Road, Volmer Road, Governor's Highway, new projects coming before the board. It's super exciting after years of asking folks and knocking on doors to finally have things moving and moving well. Also with economic development is getting getting property delinquent taxes back on the rolls to make sure that they are producing property taxes to help offset what you're paying in property taxes. And then the third is infrastructure. Infrastructure is not going away. I'm a civil engineer. We will keep pounding the pavement for grants that help fund the projects that we have and the projects that will be in front of us soon. Thank you.
I think that at the heart of what we're talking about today is how we are able to see ourselves and our village in the future. Economic development is a strong opportunity given the properties that we have available and the resources that we have in the field. Given that we don't have, like I mentioned earlier, a designated economic development strong arm, someone who has proof of concept and blueprints that we can copy and duplicate, I think is extremely important. I think that we have a huge opportunity that we haven't tapped into. I also champion our community service as our town. Most of us have moved here because of our school systems, and we have a pipeline that hasn't been utilized. We have so many retired CEOs, owners of companies, people who have been extremely huge in their professional lives that we can promote to our school children, that we are able to provide them with resources of success and show them that they can do whatever they want to do because we have those folks in our own community. I also think that we have an opportunity to do something that hasn't been done here, in that collaboration with our businesses hasn't really been put in force. So we have entrepreneurships opportunities where our students at HF can utilize the businesses in town to learn the skills that they need to learn in the future.
Thank you very much. That was the final question from the audience. I want to thank members of the audience for that, for your thoughtfulness, and we'll move on to closing statements next. And Joni Bradley-Scott, you will go first because you were second when we started this.
Sure.
All right, so I think it's 1 minute.
Thanks again for your time today. Our community is at a pivotal juncture. Either we can continue as we have for the last 4 years, down a path fractured by divisive leadership and mistrust on difficult issues, or with me, we can start down a path, one that will bring us back together and have us working to take Flossmoor to a new level of collaboration and innovation. My background in organizational leadership, real estate, and as clerk and trustee make me uniquely qualified to serve as your next mayor. I will use my real estate skills to help us develop the vacant land in Flossmoor, which will help us reduce the tax burden and provide other resources. Maintaining and growing our property values is equally important. My organizational skills will be my key to foster an inclusive community that values different ideas and perspectives. My public service experience will guide me in ensuring that our initiatives reflect our community input and the needs of our residents first. As your mayor, you always have a voice with me.
Thank you. Michelle Wilson.
Thank you so much. Thank you again to the League. Thank you to Trustee Bradley-Scott. And thanks to all of you for spending time here today. I hope that this has been helpful. If there is a question that wasn't answered, please reach out to me. I've got some flyers in the back. I've got a website that I built myself that talks about the things that we talked about here today and so much more about our wonderful accomplishments and where I see us moving forward in the future. I definitely welcome additional conversation. It has been my deepest honor and privilege to represent and serve the residents of the village of Flossmoor. I think Flossmoor residents are very smart. I think they appreciate action over political rhetoric, and it's just been an honor to be in a position that allows me to do things on a daily basis that help you and your families, and I sincerely hope to continue for the next 4 years, and that I can count on your vote, either early voting, March 17th through March 31st, or on Election Day, April 1st. Thank you so much for being here.
All right.